The ruins of a forgotten empire. The Sol Vanguard drifted silently through the empty void of space. Its hull, once shiny and new, now carried the scars of countless missions. Captain Elias Carter stood at the command deck, his eyes fixed on the holographic map floating in front of him. The crew had been exploring uncharted territories for months, hoping to find something, anything, worth reporting back to Earth. But what they found today was beyond anything they had imagined. A distress beacon. Faint, old, but still active. It pulsed weakly from a planet that wasn't on any star map. "Where's that signal coming from?" Elias asked, narrowing his eyes. His navigator, Rena, tapped on the console. "It's from a planet called Zorath Prime. According to the archives, it belonged to the Zorath Dominion." Elias frowned. Everyone in the galaxy had heard of the Zorath Dominion. They were an empire that once ruled thousands of worlds, feared and powerful. But they had disappeared centuries ago, vanished without explanation. Some said they were wiped out in a war. Others believed they destroyed themselves. But no one had ever found proof. Until now. Elias gave the order. "Set a course. We're going to Zorath Prime." As the Sol Vanguard descended through the planet's atmosphere, the crew stared in silent awe. The once great cities of Zorath Prime were now ruins. Skyscrapers lay crumbled, streets were cracked and overgrown with strange alien plants. The sky was a dull, permanent gray, as if the planet itself was mourning its fall. But the distress beacon was still active, guiding them toward the heart of the city. They landed near what appeared to be the central palace, now half buried in rubble. As the crew stepped out of the ship, a strange, heavy feeling settled over them. It wasn't just the silence. It was something deeper. It felt like the planet itself was watching them. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Juno, the ship's engineer, tightening her grip on her scanner. Elias ignored the feeling and led his team into the crumbling palace. Their footsteps echoed through empty halls. The walls were covered in alien symbols and faded murals depicting the Zorath's former glory. Battles won, planets conquered. But there were also images that seemed wrong. Dark shapes, hidden in the background, almost as if the artists were afraid to paint them clearly. After hours of searching, they found it. A large door at the end of a long corridor. It was still intact, humming faintly with power. The distress signal was coming from inside. Rena worked on the door controls, and with a hiss, it slid open. Inside was an archive room, untouched by time. Strange machines flickered weakly, and in the center of the room stood a tall, sleek AI terminal. As they approached, the terminal suddenly sprang to life. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the room. "Warning. You should not be here. Leave immediately, or face the same fate as the Zorath." The crew froze. Elias stepped forward, trying to stay calm. "We're explorers from Earth," he said. "We received your distress beacon. What happened here?" The AI paused, then spoke again. "Earth? You are from Earth." There was a strange note in its voice, something like fear. Before Elias could answer, the AI continued. "You do not understand. Earth was never the prisoner. They were the Wardens." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. The crew exchanged confused glances. "What does that mean?" Juno asked, her voice shaky. But the AI said nothing more. Ignoring the warning, Elias ordered the crew to search the archives. They needed answers. After hours of digging through old files and decrypting alien codes, they found it. A final message from the Zorath Emperor, recorded just before their empire fell. Elias activated the message. A holographic figure appeared, flickering and distorted. The Emperor's face was filled with terror, his voice shaking as he spoke. "To whoever finds this, we made a mistake. We thought Earth was just another planet to conquer. We didn't know. We didn't understand. They were not prisoners. They were the last line of defense." The crew listened in stunned silence as the Emperor continued. "We freed them. The things they were guarding. We thought we could control them. We were wrong. They destroyed us. And now, they will come for you too. The message ended, leaving only the faint hum of the machines in the room. Elias felt a cold shiver run down his spine. What had humanity been guarding? And why had no one ever known about it? Before they could process the information, the AI's voice returned, louder this time. You have been warned. They are coming. You cannot stop them. Suddenly, the ground beneath them rumbled. The walls trembled as if something massive was moving beneath the city. Elias snapped into action. Everyone, back to the ship. Now, but as they turned to leave, a distant, echoing sound reached their ears. A low, guttural growl that didn't belong to any creature they knew. The crew raced through the crumbling halls, their hearts pounding. But deep down, they all knew. They were too late. The truth buried in history. The Sol Vanguard shot through the atmosphere of Zoreth Prime like a ghost fleeing from its own reflection. Inside the ship, the crew was silent. No one spoke, no one dared. The words of the Zoreth Emperor echoed in their minds, repeating like a cursed chant. Earth was not the prisoner. They were the last line of defense. Captain Elias Carter stared at the cracked data chip clenched in his hand. The Zoreth's final message. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. Earth, the last line of defense. Against what? The ship's AI, Nova, broke the silence, her calm voice almost mocking the tension in the room. Captain, I recommend we set a course back to Earth for immediate analysis. Elias didn't answer. Instead, his eyes were fixed on the view screen. As they left Zoreth Prime's orbit, something caught his attention. It wasn't just the ruins on the surface, it was what lay beneath. The planet's core was unstable, according to the readings, but not from natural causes. It was as if something had been buried deep within the planet, and whatever it was, it had been trying to break free for centuries. Elias finally spoke, his voice low. Nova, pull up all historical records on Earth's early contact with the Zoreth Dominion. There was a pause. No records available, Captain. Elias frowned. What do you mean, no records? The Zoreth dominated half the galaxy. They had to have encountered Earth. Nova's voice didn't waver. All data related to Earth's interactions with the Zoreth Dominion is classified at the highest level. Authorization denied. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Juno, gripping the edge of her console, whispered, "Why would Earth hide something like that?" Before anyone could answer, the ship jolted violently. Warning lights flashed. Alarms blared. Rena frantically checked the sensors. Captain, something's following us. Elias spun around. What is it? Rena's face went pale as she stared at the screen. I don't know. It's not a ship. It's something else. The view screen flickered, and for a brief, horrifying moment, they saw it. A shadow. Not solid, not entirely there, but moving, alive. It was vast, stretching across the void like a living wound in space, and wherever it moved, the stars seemed to dim. Nova's voice cut through the chaos. Warning. Unknown entity detected. Recommend immediate evasive action. But no matter how fast the Sol Vanguard moved, the shadow kept pace. It wasn't just following them. It was hunting them. Elias clenched his jaw. We need answers, and we're not getting them out here. He turned to Rena. Send an encrypted message to Earth. Tell them we found the Zoreth's final message, and that we're bringing something back. Rena hesitated. Do you think they'll help us? Elias's eyes darkened. They'd better, because if they don't, we're all dead. Hours later, as they raced toward Earth, the crew gathered in the mess hall, their nerves frayed. The Emperor's message replayed in the background, over and over. We freed them, the things they were guarding. We thought we could control them. We were wrong. Juno slammed her fist on the table. What the hell does that even mean? What were we guarding? Why didn't anyone tell us? No one had an answer. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life. Incoming transmission from Earth Command. The crew rushed to the bridge, hearts pounding. The screen lit up, revealing a calm, expressionless officer in a dark uniform. But what struck them wasn't the message. It was the officer's eyes. Cold, knowing, as if he had been expecting this moment. Sol Vanguard, this is Earth Command. We've received your transmission. The officer paused, his voice dropping lower. Do not attempt to return to Earth. Elias stared in disbelief. What? We're under attack. We need support. The officer's face didn't change. You've encountered something you were never meant to find. Return, and you risk releasing it on the entire galaxy. The crew erupted into protests. But Elias silenced them with a raised hand. His voice was ice. What did we find? For the first time, the officer's mask cracked, just slightly. His next words sent a chill down their spines. You found the reason the Zoreth fell. The reason we never joined the galactic community. You found the truth. The screen went black. The crew was left in stunned silence. But before they could process the message, Nova's voice returned, softer this time. Captain, I've decrypted part of the Zoreth archives. Elias leaned forward. What did you find? A hologram flickered to life in front of them. It showed a map of the galaxy, with Earth at the center. But surrounding Earth was something else. Symbols, ancient and dark, marking the edges of a vast, invisible prison. Nova's voice dropped to a whisper. Earth wasn't the prisoner. Earth was the lock. And now, Elias realized with a cold, sinking feeling, the lock was breaking. The Shadow War. The Sol Vanguard floated in the endless black, a fragile speck of metal and hope in the vastness of space. But hope was running out. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge, staring at the void that trailed behind them like a living shadow. It wasn't just following. It was growing, stretching across the stars, eating the light, and leaving only darkness behind. It had been 3 days since they escaped Zoreth Prime. 3 days since they learned the terrible truth. Earth was never the prisoner. Earth was the warden. But what haunted Elias the most wasn't the shadow chasing them. It was the silence from Earth. They had sent multiple distress calls. No response. No help. Only that chilling message from Earth Command. Do not return. You've seen too much. Elias clenched his fists. They weren't just running from an enemy. They were running from the truth. And it was catching up fast. In the lower decks, the crew was unraveling. Juno, the ship's engineer, sat in the dim light of the engine room, her eyes hollow. She replayed the Zoreth Emperor's message over and over, as if searching for a clue. We freed them. The things they were guarding. We thought we could control them. We were wrong. The words scratched at her mind like claws. Across from her, Rena studied the decrypted files they'd stolen from Zoreth Prime. The alien language had been difficult to crack, but what she found made her blood run cold. Juno, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. The Zoreth. They called them the Voidborn. Juno looked up, eyes wide. What are they? Rena swallowed hard. Not creatures. Not exactly. They're hunger. Darkness made real. They don't just kill, they erase. Planets, people, even memories. Like they never existed. Juno shuddered. But why was Earth guarding them? Why didn't we know? Rena's face darkened. Because Earth didn't trust anyone else. They knew. If the galaxy found out, someone would try to control the Voidborn, like the Zoreth did. And now, Juno whispered. Rena's voice was a hollow echo. Now, they're awake. Back on the bridge, Elias watched as the shadow crept closer. The ship's sensors were useless. It wasn't something you could measure. It was beyond science, beyond reason. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The ship groaned, as if something heavy pressed against its hull. Nova, the ship's AI, spoke, her usually calm voice strained. Captain, We are not alone. Elias didn't need her to tell him. He could feel it, the cold, gnawing presence pressing against his mind, whispering in a language older than time. And then they heard it, a scratching sound, faint at first, like nails on metal. But it grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was coming from inside their skulls. "They're here," Nova whispered. The crew rushed to the bridge, their faces pale with terror. Before Elias could speak, the ship's lights died, plunging them into darkness. But it wasn't complete. From the corners of the room, shadows moved, shifting and writhing like living things. Shapes began to take form, twisted figures with no eyes, no mouths, only endless, yawning voids where faces should be. They had no names, no purpose, only one instinct: consume. One of the shadows lunged at a crew member, Devon, before anyone could react. His scream was cut short as the creature touched him, and in an instant, he was gone. Not just dead, erased. His body, his memories, even his name vanished from their minds. Elias tried to remember Devon's face, but it was already slipping away, like a dream fading at dawn. "We need to get out of here," Juno screamed. But Elias knew running wouldn't save them. The Voidborn weren't just chasing them. They were inside the ship now, and they wouldn't stop until everything was gone. Desperation clawed at Elias's mind, but a sudden thought sparked in the chaos. "The Eclipse Protocol," he whispered. Rena's eyes snapped to him. "What?" Elias turned, his voice steady despite the fear. The Zoreth files mentioned it. The only thing that could stop them. Juno's eyes widened. "But the Zoreth failed to use it. What makes you think we can?" Elias's jaw tightened, because the Zoreth didn't understand it. But Earth did. "We just need to find out how." Nova's voice flickered back online, weaker this time. "Captain, there's a sealed vault beneath Zoreth Prime. The Zoreth tried to open it, but they couldn't. It's human in origin." Elias's heart pounded. "A vault? What's inside?" Nova paused, as if hesitant to speak. "The last piece of the Eclipse Protocol." Elias didn't hesitate. He turned to the crew. "We're going back to Zoreth Prime." Juno stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Are you insane?" "That's where this all started." Elias's eyes burned with determination. "Exactly. And that's where it ends." As the Sol Vanguard turned back toward the cursed planet, the Voidborn followed, their hunger insatiable. But Elias wasn't afraid anymore. Because now he knew the truth. Earth wasn't weak. Earth wasn't scared. Earth had been waiting. The unseen horror. The Sol Vanguard landed on Zoreth Prime with a soft, reluctant thud, as if even the ship itself knew it shouldn't be here. The planet's atmosphere was heavier now, thicker, as if the air itself was aware of their return. The skies above were darker, not from clouds, but from the Voidborn that slithered and coiled just beyond sight. Captain Elias Carter stepped onto the desolate soil, his boots crunching against shattered glass and debris from a civilization that had once ruled the stars. But now, the mighty Zoreth Empire was nothing more than dust and echoes. They were here for one reason: to find the sealed vault hidden beneath the planet. The last hope, the final piece of the Eclipse Protocol. But deep down, Elias knew they weren't alone. The crew moved cautiously through the ruined streets of Zoreth Prime, their weapons drawn, their eyes darting at every flicker of shadow. The city was silent, but not the peaceful kind of silent. This was the kind that pressed against your chest, made your skin crawl, and whispered in your ear when no one else was speaking. As they neared the palace ruins, Rena stopped dead in her tracks. Her scanner, which had been quiet since they landed, suddenly spiked with activity. "Captain," she whispered, her voice trembling. "There's movement. Beneath us." Before Elias could respond, the ground beneath their feet rumbled, a deep, guttural vibration that wasn't natural. It felt like the planet itself was breathing. Juno, gripping her plasma rifle tighter, hissed, "Whatever that is, It's awake now. Elias nodded grimly. Then we'd better move fast. They reached the entrance to the underground vault, a massive door covered in alien symbols. But as they approached, they realized something strange. The symbols weren't Zorith. They were human. "What the hell is this?" Juno whispered, running her fingers over the markings. How did humans get here before the Zorith? Elias didn't have an answer. None of them did. But the deeper they went, the more obvious it became. This wasn't just an alien ruin. It was a prison Earth had built. The vault doors groaned open, revealing a narrow corridor that descended deep into the planet's crust. The walls pulsed faintly with an unnatural light, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to move even when the crew stood still. The deeper they went, the colder it got. Not just the temperature, but something inside them felt frozen, as if the air was sucking the warmth from their souls. Then they heard it, a faint whisper echoing off the walls. At first it was just one voice, soft and distant, but then it grew, multiple voices, overlapping, speaking in a language that none of them understood, but all of them felt. Rena clutched her head. "Make it stop. Make it stop." Elias forced himself to keep moving, even as the voices clawed at his mind. They were close now. He could feel it. Finally, they reached the chamber. In the center of the room stood a dark, pulsating orb, suspended in midair by beams of strange, crackling energy. It wasn't just technology. It felt alive, as if it was watching them, waiting for them. Nova's voice crackled through their comms, strained and barely audible. "Captain, that's it. The core of the Eclipse Protocol." But before they could move, the shadows around them shifted. They weren't alone. From the corners of the room, the Voidborn emerged. But these weren't like the shadows they'd seen before. These were different, bigger, more defined, as if they had been feeding off the fear and death that filled this place. They had no faces, no eyes, just voids where features should be, and limbs that moved unnaturally, bending and twisting in ways that defied logic. One of the creatures lunged, faster than any of them could react. It slammed into Marcus, the ship's medic, and in an instant he was gone. Not just dead, erased. The spot where he stood was empty, as if he had never existed. The crew opened fire, but their weapons did nothing. The plasma bolts passed through the creatures, as if they weren't even there. Elias grabbed the orb, hoping, praying, that it was the key. But as his fingers closed around it, a wave of cold shot through his body. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he wasn't in the vault anymore. He was somewhere else. A vast, endless void, stretching out in all directions. And in the distance, he saw them. The Voidborn. But behind them, standing like silent sentinels, were humans. Not just any humans. Ancient ones, wearing armor that glowed with a light that the Voidborn couldn't touch. And then he understood. Earth hadn't just built the prison. They had been the Wardens all along. Elias snapped back to reality, gasping for breath. The Voidborn were closing in, their forms twisting and writhing like living shadows. He knew what he had to do. "Get back to the ship," he shouted. But Juno started to protest. "Now," Elias roared. The crew didn't argue. They sprinted back down the corridor, the creatures hot on their heels. But Elias stayed behind, his hand still gripping the orb. He whispered the words that had come to him in the vision, words in a language older than humanity itself. The orb flared to life, releasing a blinding light that filled the chamber. The Voidborn screamed, their forms unraveling like smoke in the wind. But Elias didn't stop, because he knew the truth now. This wasn't just a battle. It was a war, and Earth had been fighting it for a very, very long time. The return of the Wardens. The Sol Vanguard tore through the darkness of space, engines screaming as if the ship itself knew the terror that followed. But no matter how fast they flew, the Voidborn were never far behind. They weren't just chasing the crew, They were chasing the Eclipse Protocol orb that Captain Elias Carter now guarded like his life depended on it. Because it did. The crew was shaken. Marcus was gone, erased from existence. His name, his face, it all faded from their memories like smoke in the wind. Only Elias remembered. Maybe it was the orb, or maybe it was something else, but he could still feel Marcus's absence like a hole in his chest. Juno slammed her fist against the console, her eyes wild with fear. We can't outrun them, Elias. These things, they're everywhere. Elias didn't respond. His mind was racing, but not with fear, with purpose. He knew now what the Zorath never did. He knew why Earth had been silent, why the truth had been buried. Because this wasn't humanity's first encounter with the Voidborn. It was just the latest round in a war that had been waged for thousands of years. Suddenly, Nova, the ship's AI, crackled to life. Her voice, usually calm and composed, was laced with something new. Urgency. Captain. Incoming transmission. From Earth. The crew froze. For days they had begged, screamed, and pleaded for help. And now, at the edge of annihilation, Earth finally answered. Elias gave a curt nod. Put it through. The screen flickered, static dancing across the display before revealing a figure shrouded in shadows. The face was obscured, but the voice was unmistakable, cold, confident, and utterly unafraid. Sol Vanguard, this is Earth Command. You have something that belongs to us. Elias felt his jaw tighten. You mean this? He held up the Eclipse Protocol orb, its faint light pulsing like a heartbeat. You sent us out here without a clue what we were walking into. And now you want to clean up the mess. The figure didn't flinch. You were never meant to survive, Captain Carter. But since you did, we'll need that orb back. And you'll need to follow our instructions exactly if you want to live. Juno cursed under her breath. They knew. They knew all along. Elias ignored her. His eyes were locked on the screen. You said not to return. Now you want us back. For a moment, the shadowed figure was silent. Then they spoke, their words sending a chill through the room. Because the war isn't over, Captain. It never was. And it's time you remembered who Earth really is. As the transmission ended, something shifted outside the ship. The crew rushed to the observation deck, their breath catching in their throats. The stars that had once twinkled peacefully now glowed with a different light, one that wasn't natural. Ships began to emerge from the darkness, not from hyperspace or any known technology, but as if they had always been there, hidden just beyond the edge of human perception. An entire fleet, silent, massive, and unlike anything the crew had ever seen. These weren't standard Earth ships. They were older, sleeker, and covered in symbols that pulsed with the same light as the Eclipse Protocol orb. Their hulls seemed to shimmer, not reflecting light, but absorbing it. Elias's heart pounded in his chest. They'd been here all along, Rena whispered, her voice trembling. Watching. Waiting. The largest ship in the fleet moved forward, its size dwarfing the Sol Vanguard. A new transmission came through, but this time, it wasn't cold or distant. It was familiar. Captain Carter, this is Admiral Sloan of the Warden fleet. You've done well bringing the protocol back. Now stand down and prepare for extraction. Warden fleet. The words hit Elias like a punch to the gut. The stories, the old Earth myths of guardians who protected humanity from threats beyond the stars. They weren't just stories. Earth hadn't been hiding. Earth had been guarding. But before Elias could respond, the ship shuddered violently. The Voidborn were here. The crew watched in horror as the shadows descended on the fleet, their formless bodies writhing and twisting in ways that defied physics. But this time, Earth was ready. The Warden fleet moved with precision, their weapons firing beams of light that pierced the darkness, shredding the Voidborn into nothingness. But it wasn't just light. It was something deeper, something older. Technology that no alien race had ever seen, powered by forces that humanity had kept hidden for millennia. But the Voidborn were evolving. They learned from every encounter, growing stronger, smarter. The battle was far from over. Elias gripped the Eclipse Protocol orb tightly, feeling its energy pulse through his veins. He realized then that this wasn't just about surviving. It was about finishing what Earth had started. He turned to his crew, their faces pale but determined. "We're not just passengers in this war. We're part of it." Juno nodded, her fear replaced with fierce resolve. "Then let's show them what humanity is made of." As the Sol Vanguard joined the fleet, Elias knew one thing for certain. The galaxy had always underestimated Earth. They saw humans as weak, insignificant. But they were wrong. Earth wasn't the prisoner. Earth wasn't the victim. Earth was the warden. And the Wardens had finally returned. The final stand. The void was no longer just a distant shadow. It was here, wrapping around the Sol Vanguard, and the Warden fleet like a suffocating shroud. The Voidborn had come in full force, twisting, formless horrors that defied reality itself. They weren't just attacking ships. They were consuming existence. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge, watching as entire sections of the fleet were swallowed into nothingness. Ships, crews, even the light of distant stars. Gone in an instant. Not destroyed. Not dead. Erased. But Earth wasn't backing down. For the first time in galactic history, the true strength of humanity was on full display. The Warden fleet moved with terrifying precision. These weren't standard military ships. They were relics of an ancient war, crafted with technology that no other species in the galaxy had ever seen. Weapons of light that didn't just pierce the darkness. They undid it, unraveling the very fabric of the Voidborn. But even with all that power, it wasn't enough. The Voidborn were evolving. Every strike, every beam of light that tore through them only made them smarter, faster, hungrier. They learned from failure, adapting to humanity's defenses in ways that defied logic. Elias clenched his fists. This wasn't just a battle. It was a test. The Zorath had failed it. The galaxy had failed it. Now, it was Earth's final chance. On the Sol Vanguard's bridge, the crew worked frantically. Juno rerouted power from the main engines to the weapons, her fingers flying over the controls. Rena was deep in the archives, trying to decode the last fragments of data from the Eclipse Protocol. But time was running out. "We can't keep this up," Juno shouted, her voice cracking under the strain. "They're adapting faster than we can fight." Elias didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the orb pulsing in his hand, the heart of the Eclipse Protocol. It was more than just a weapon. It was the key to everything. He remembered the vision from the vault on Zorath Prime, the ancient human wardens standing against the Voidborn, wielding weapons that glowed with impossible light. Earth hadn't just fought the Voidborn. They had bound them. And Elias realized something that sent a chill through his bones. The protocol wasn't just meant to destroy the Voidborn. It was meant to sacrifice something. Suddenly, a new transmission crackled through the comms. Admiral Sloan of the Warden fleet appeared on the screen, her face hardened with resolve. "Captain Carter, we're falling back. We need to regroup and activate the full Eclipse Protocol." Elias shook his head. "Regroup where? The Voidborn are everywhere. There's no safe place left." Sloane's eyes darkened. "That's why we're not going somewhere safe. We're making Earth the battleground." The words hit Elias like a punch to the gut. "Earth?" Juno whispered, her face pale. "But we've been protecting Earth all this time." Sloane nodded grimly. "Exactly. But now, Earth is the only place where we can finish this." The protocol was designed to be activated there, for one final stand. The fleet began to move, retreating toward Earth with the Voidborn in pursuit. The journey wasn't measured in days or hours. It was a race against oblivion. As the Sol Vanguard approached Earth's orbit, Elias felt a strange, overwhelming sense of calm. The planet below looked just as it always had: blue oceans, green forests, bustling cities unaware of the cosmic nightmare descending upon them. But now he saw it differently. Earth wasn't just a planet. It was a fortress. And its people were Wardens. In Earth's orbit, the Warden fleet took position. Massive structures, hidden for centuries, began to rise from the planet's surface. Ancient pylons built into the very bones of the Earth, humming with energy that predated civilization. The Eclipse Protocol was awakening. Elias stood at the helm, the orb glowing brighter in his hand. He knew what came next. Captain Nova, the ship's AI, spoke softly. The protocol requires a human conduit. Someone has to complete the circuit. Elias didn't hesitate. This was always the cost. The Voidborn descended, their formless bodies blotting out the stars, a tsunami of darkness ready to consume Earth. The Warden fleet fired everything they had, beams of light lancing through the void. But it wasn't enough. The Voidborn were unstoppable. Unless Elias made the ultimate choice. He stepped into the activation chamber, the orb pulsing in sync with his heartbeat. His crew watched, their faces a mix of fear and pride. "You don't have to do this," Reyna whispered, tears in her eyes. Elias smiled softly. "Yes, I do. Because this is what humanity is. We don't run. We don't hide." He placed the orb into the core, feeling its energy surge through him. The light was blinding, but he didn't look away. We are the Wardens. The Eclipse Protocol activated. A wave of light exploded from Earth, sweeping across the solar system like a tidal force. It wasn't just light. It was memory, purpose, and will. The Voidborn shrieked, their forms unraveling as they were pulled into the light, bound once more by the force that humanity had safeguarded for millennia. But Elias knew this wasn't just about containment. The protocol required balance. For every Voidborn erased, a part of him was given in return. When the light faded, the Voidborn were gone. Earth was safe. But Elias Carter was no more. His name, his face, his entire existence had been sacrificed to seal the Voidborn. But the crew of the Sol Vanguard remembered. Because Earth remembers its Wardens. And when the Voidborn rise again, humanity will be ready. Juno was the first to break the silence, her voice soft but filled with grief. "Do you feel it?" she whispered. "It's like he's gone. Not just dead, but like he was never here." Reyna nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I tried to pull up his records in the ship's database. There's nothing. No service history. No mission logs. It's like Elias Carter never existed." But they remembered him. Somehow they held on to the fragments of his face, his voice, his leadership, because the protocol hadn't erased him from their hearts. Only from the world. A transmission crackled through the comms. The screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Sloan, the leader of the Warden fleet. Her face was stoic, but her eyes betrayed a deep sorrow. "Sol Vanguard, this is Earth Command. The Eclipse Protocol has been successfully reactivated. The Voidborn are sealed once more." Juno stepped forward, her voice trembling with anger. "And Elias, what about him?" There was a long pause. Then Sloan spoke, her voice softer this time. "Captain Carter fulfilled his duty. He is part of the protocol now. His sacrifice ensured the survival of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy." Reyna clenched her fists. "He wasn't just a sacrifice. He was our captain. Our friend." Sloane's gaze hardened. He was a Warden. The crew was given permission to return to Earth, but as the Sol Vanguard descended through the atmosphere, they realized the world below wasn't the same place they had left. It looked the same, cities bustling with life, oceans glistening under the sun. But there was something beneath the surface, something ancient and powerful that they could feel in their bones. Earth had always been more than just a planet. It was a fortress, a prison, and its people were not just inhabitants. They were guardians of a truth too dangerous to share. When the crew disembarked, they were met not by fanfare or celebration, but by silence. No parades, no recognition. The events that had transpired in deep space were already being scrubbed from public knowledge. The Voidborn, the Zorath Empire, the Eclipse Protocol. All of it was classified, buried, forgotten. But the crew couldn't forget. In the weeks that followed, Juno and Rena tried to resume their normal lives. But it was impossible. They saw Elias's face in their dreams. They heard his voice in the quiet moments between waking and sleep. And one day, a message appeared in their private comm channels. No encryption, no signature, just 5 words. The Wardens never forget. Rena tracked the message to a hidden network deep within Earth's military systems, a network that predated any government, any organization they had ever known. The Warden Network. And it wasn't just a communication system. It was a recruitment. They were summoned to a remote facility hidden beneath the icy landscapes of Antarctica, a place that didn't exist on any map. When they arrived, they found themselves standing before an ancient door, carved with the same symbols they had seen on Zorath Prime. As the door creaked open, a voice echoed from within. "Welcome, Wardens." They stepped inside, their hearts pounding. The chamber was vast, filled with relics from battles long forgotten. But at the center of it all was a monument, a statue of a man holding the Eclipse Protocol orb. Elias Carter. His name wasn't written anywhere. His face wasn't perfectly carved. But they knew it was him. And beneath the statue, a plaque read, "For those who guard the darkness, so others may live in the light." Juno turned to Rena, her voice steady. "What now?" Rena smiled faintly. "Now, we take his place." Because the truth was clear. The galaxy would never know the real story. They would never know how close they came to annihilation. But Earth knew, and Earth would always be ready. Because the Wardens never sleep. And when the Voidborn rise again, humanity will be there. Watching, waiting, protecting, just like they always have.